Hey class, I hope you're enjoying the discussion this week. I wanted to take some time to offer some different perspectives to help further our discussion and help encourage you to engage more with what we're talking about. I wanted to talk about our two questions, and the two questions that we've been discussing. The first one is autocratic versus democratic in leadership style. Which would you prefer to be led by? And can a leader with one style change over to be a leader with a different style? The second question is essentially, are leaders made? Are they born that way? Or can you learn to be a leader? Both of those are really bad questions. And I intentionally asked you those bad questions because I think when we think about leadership, it's kind of how we think. We think in very narrow terms. I'm really hoping that over the course of this next 8 weeks, we'll be able to broaden our perspective and our understanding of what leadership means and how we, regardless of the position that we are in, can go about being better leaders. It's a leadership development class, right? So I want us to develop our understanding of what leadership is. So let's take a look at those two questions individually, and hopefully I'll be able to offer some clarification. All right, so the first one, autocratic versus democratic leadership styles. When we first think about leadership, typically that's one of the first things that comes to our mind. If you ask people to start naming popular leaders, who do we name? We name the president. When we ask for bad leaders, we name Hitler. It's always the one that comes up, first one that comes to your mind. When we think of good leaders, maybe we'll think of pastors. Depending on your politics, you'll maybe mention the president. But it just kind of these upper level, very democratic or autocratic, good, bad type leaders. But I want us to understand that leadership is so much more of a spectrum. It's so much broader than just narrow categories of democratic style or autocratic style. And so therefore, whether or not a leader can become more autocratic or become more democratic, yeah, if it's a continuum, we can move along a continuum. If it's a silo, or if it's a box that you're in, it's pretty hard to move out of a box. So I think one way to help you see that broader perspective is to offer some clarity with definitions. So some of the definitions that we have seen this week. We've talked about autocratic and what that is, and democratic and what that is. And yet, again, the lecture's notes don't provide a real expansive understanding of that. So let me offer some more understanding. Let me suggest two words that might be a better way of thinking about autocratic and democratic leadership. We've got consideration, and we've got initiating structure. When we think about a leader's consideration, we're thinking about their respect of the followers, their respect of the followers' feelings and the ideas of the followers. A leader that establishes trust, a leader that listens, a leader that seeks input. These all seem like traits that we'd really like to have in our leaders. And one could also say that they might be the traits of a democratic type of leader. Now, when we think about initiating structure, that's where we see a leader that's task-oriented, a leader that directs workers' activity towards goal achievement. They're very focused on the end goal. A leader that does planning very independently, a leader that schedules work activities for the followers so everything's very clearly planned out. But that doesn't necessarily mean that a leader that initiates structure can't also respect the follower, their feeling, their ideas, can't also be one that establishes trust, can't also be one that listens or seeks input. It just means that that leader that is more on the initiating structure side of things is more directive in how they want certain tasks accomplished, and that they want certain tasks accomplished. You can have a leader that is both high in consideration and high in initiating structure. You can have a leader that's high in initiating structure and low in consideration, and we might consider, yeah, that's the type of leader I don't want to follow, that's the jerk. We could also have a leader that's really high in consideration, really low in initiating structure, and you kind of wonder, well, who's in charge? Does anything ever get done? And so that's maybe another way of looking at this discussion of autocratic versus democratic. And then there's this graph that's known as the leadership grid. It's in a book that originally comes from a book called Leadership Dilemma by Robert Blake and Ann Adams McCanns. And so this is all their ideas. I'm just showing them to you. And so you can see on this grid kind of how a leader might be rated in their concern for people, so consideration, or in their concern for results, so structure. Are they high concern for people, so are they on the 9 end, or are they low in their concern for people? Are they high in their concern for results, so you can see that along the bottom of the grid, or are they low in their concern of results? So what does that look like practically? Well, they have different types that they have labeled. They say the country club management is high in concern for people, low in concern for results. So this type of leader is very thoughtful in the attention that they give to the needs of people, for satisfying relationships. They want a very friendly organization, a very friendly place to work, and a very easy work tempo. Hence the country club idea. Well, then there's the authority compliance. They are the what feels like the opposite, right? They're low in their concern for people. They're high in their concern for results. They're all about efficiency and management. They want to see results. They want to arrange conditions in such a way that work gets done, and there are minimal interferences with the end result being accomplished. Then there is the middle of the road, someone who's sort of in between. They're concerned for people, they're concerned for results, it's about the same. Now, this might seem like a really good place to be, but I would also ask, if someone is sort of middle of the road when it comes to concern for people, middle of the road when it comes to concern for results, what's really happening? Are we accomplishing anything? Isn't part of leadership helping people accomplish something that they wouldn't otherwise be able to accomplish? And if we're not accomplishing at least togetherness, growing a sense of trust and understanding with one another, and we're not really accomplishing our goal of what we're trying to accomplish as an organization or institution, we're just sort of stuck in the middle. I would question whether or not that's really good or effective leadership. Effectiveness is another word that I saw a lot in our discussion post. Well, how do you define effective? If feeling good is effective, then country club style leadership is what you want. If getting the job done is what you consider effective, then authority compliance is your idea of effective. But there are also two other ways of looking at leadership here on this grid. The first one is impoverished leadership. And the authors say that this is the exertion of minimal effort to get the required work done and to sustain organizational membership. So this is the leader that is really just a warm body in the chair. They've got the title. That's about it. Not much is getting done. Kind of free-for-all. Probably the least effective, regardless of how you define effective, form of leadership. And then there is team leadership. Now, team leadership or team management is considered the most effective style and is recommended because not only do the people, the followers, the workers feel supported, feel valued, feel like their ideas mattered, but we also see the results taking place. Now, what type of leader can be a team leader? That's a hard question. Because we would say, oh, well, if that's the most effective, that's what I want to be. Yeah, I want to see results happen. I want to see people cared for. But that's a lot of work. That's a lot of effort. This is going to take a lot of learning, a lot of mistakes along the way, a lot of training, and it's probably not going to be natural to any of us. Naturally, we are probably going to either be country club or authority compliance, or we'll say, well, I'm somewhere in the middle of the road. But if there's another option that requires a lot more intentionality, you just have to know it's going to be hard work to get there. Team leadership, having it both democratic as well as accomplishing goals, is difficult. Having experienced leaders who are both country club, having experience as well as authority compliance, having had those different types of leaders, and trying myself to be a leader that doesn't fall off onto either side of that, even though I know I'm probably more minded towards the authority. I like to see results happen, and I want to tell you how to do it. I have to pull myself back a little bit. Ideally, I'd like to be a team leader, but that's difficult. And we just need to know that. And we need to know that there's going to be resistance. Not everybody feels like there should be democratic style of leadership. Not everybody is going to like the way the group thinks. The group is not always going to come up with the best idea. Studies have shown that authority, autocratic leadership, for getting the task done while the leader is present, that's the best way to do it. As soon as the leader is gone, everything breaks down. And so, yeah, it's just one more thing to consider. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the autocratic style of leadership, the democratic style of leadership. Can a leader become one or the other? Well, that's a good question. Obviously, we are in a class learning about leadership. And if I didn't think that we could change as leaders, it'd be pretty pointless for me to be spending a lot of effort teaching us about leadership. I think we can, as leaders, become, or at least foster environments where there's more structure or where there's more concern for individuals. But it also goes back to a little bit of personality. If I am naturally a more structured person, so if you're familiar with Myers-Briggs, I'm a J, I'm an S, I like structure, I like lists, I like to-do lists, that's not going to change about me. But I'm also a feeler, so I care about what people think. And I want to know that people feel valued. So sometimes there's that tension between I really want to get the thing done because that's the way I'm wired, but I also really want people to like me. I think sometimes democratic leaders are really just people pleasers, and they don't know how to put their foot down. They don't know how to say, no, this is what we're going to do because this is the right thing. In the study of historical leadership, leaders who are seen as courageous and as people who have really made a difference, even thinking briefly through United States history. Abraham Lincoln, considered by historians to be one of the better presidents we've had to make very hard decisions. Worked on a team of cabinet members that was opposed to him almost the majority of the time because they all wanted his job and did not understand how this nobody from Illinois became president. He was in the midst of a war, had to make very, very hard decisions, and yet also had to manage this team with conflicting personalities and had to do so in a way where somehow everybody got along. I think he managed to be a team leader, as this grid might show. Other leaders, Eisenhower, he was very much a structured leader. He grew up, was trained through the military, worked his way through the ranks to be 5-star general. He was a structured person. And yet, he was also one of the most respected men in America throughout, from the time post-World War II through his death in the 1960s, because he just came across as warm. He came across as everybody's grandpa. Everybody wanted to be near him because he was both caring about the people that he led. You can see that in some of the speeches he gave his troops leading up to D-Day. He felt the pain that they were going to experience landing in Normandy, but he was also very much about structure. And so they managed to balance both the democratic, we want people to feel good, we want people to know they're valued, with getting results, getting things done. All right, I started on a tangent. I really don't know how I ended up there. So let's move on. All right, trait versus process. The second question that we had to answer, is leadership something you're born with, or is it something that you develop throughout your life? Again, we need to define, well, what is leadership? If it's a trait, so something that comes naturally as a result of certain characteristics that are inherent to a person, then you're born with it. So people who are taller are looked up to more because they're tall. Get it? But no, like people naturally, studies have shown that people who are taller are viewed by others more readily, quicklier, to be leaders than those who are shorter. Hence the idea of the Napoleon complex, a very short man, but someone who's trying to take over the world. So perhaps you've interacted with someone who was, a little height deficient, and yet they were trying to demonstrate that they were just as superior as everybody else. Had a boss like that, very difficult to work for. But other traits besides heights, that's kind of a rabbit trail. Extroversion. People who are extroverted are perceived to be leaders more so than people who are introverts. People with greater intelligence are perceived to be leaders more so than people with average intelligence. People who are charismatic in their personality style are perceived to be leaders more so. So is that it? Is it just fate determined all by your personality, your intelligence, and things that you have no control of? Well, if that's how you define leadership, then leaders are born. They're not made. But if you define leadership as a phenomenon that resides in the context of interaction between leaders and followers, so it's really about relationship that one person has with a group or with another individual, or it's a relationship, then it's a process, and anyone could be a leader. It can be learned. Some people are going to be much more effective in that process, in that relationship, than others. But what is that based off? Is that based off things they've learned? So then we can bring in this concept of emotional intelligence, how aware they are of themselves, how aware they are of others, how much they manage their own selves, their strengths and their weaknesses, how much they can influence others. All of these things need to be taken into consideration when we talk about, again, what's a leader and what's a successful leader. Maybe another thing for us to consider when we think about what is leadership is also thinking about what is power. Because often we think about them synonymously. Maybe they are, maybe they're not synonymous. But there are two different types of power in its kind of broadest understanding of power. There's positional power, which is based on a formal title, a job role, a job, a role, or a responsibility that somebody has. So that power comes more from the title than it does from the individual. And then there's personal power, and based on relationships with other people, how well they engage in those relationships. One author called it influence capacity, and I see that I spelled capacity wrong on the slide. Okay. But influence capacity. What is your capacity to influence other people? What is your capacity to expand their understanding of the world around them? One author, Max Dupree, said that the role of a leader is to define reality for the followers. So what's your capacity to do that for the people that follow you? To say, this is how things are, or something that excites me even more is, this is how things could be. I think one of the leader's roles is to inspire vision. So they can either do that through a positional sort of role, or through personal influence, sort of magnetism. We can't control whether or not we're in a position of power. We can determine whether or not we're going to be the type of person whose character, whose internal qualities and traits are relational. And that's one thing I want to kind of continue to come back to in this course is, as we talk about what leaders do, let's also not forget who leaders are, the internal reality of a leader, the character of a leader. And I think within our context at Grace College, we're not going to try to separate our spiritual understanding of human beings from leadership, and that's all going to play a part in it. So, who are you as an individual, and are you the type of person? Are you becoming the type of person that other people want to follow? I think that's a question to continue to ask yourself throughout this course as we talk about different ideas, different concepts, different models, different ways of understanding. These are all, each week we're going to kind of put on a new lens, a new pair of glasses that help us see leadership for maybe a different perspective. But through all that, I don't want us to lose sight of who am I as a leader and who am I becoming, and am I the type of person that, regardless of whether or not I have a position or not, my influence capacity is growing. Not so that I can manipulate people, not so I can control people, not so that I can tell people what to do, but so that I can make their lives and the world around us a better place. Alright, this was much longer than I anticipated. Hope it didn't bore any of you to death. For those of you that did, I'm sorry. But hopefully there are some things for you to continue to engage. So, ask questions. Your response to this video can be considered part of one of your 2 responses per discussion board. And so there needs to be a total of 4 responses this week because we've got 2 discussion boards. So continue to engage, respond back to each other. If somebody posts on your one of your comments, respond back, engage in conversation. Again, I think it's one of the best ways that we're going to learn. So good luck, continue to engage with one another. Oh, one more thing. In your initial discussion post, don't forget to cite your sources. A lot of this is going to be your perspective, but I want it to be based on something. I want it to be based on the reading, outside research, whatever it might be. Just to kind of continue to think, interact with the ideas that are being presented through the lectures or through the resources or things like that. So, all right. Hopefully, I'll be back with a shorter video next week.